He told me I was his second chance, said he'd been through pain too, and that with me, he felt peace again. I met him at 67 after church. He was polite, always listening, always opening doors. He brought me tea, called me thoughtful, said I made quiet feel safe. I hadn't been seen like that in years. So when he asked me to marry him, I said yes. I thought I was choosing love. I didn't know then that some people don't fall for your heart. They study your silence, then use it. Thank you for listening. I don't know where you're watching from or what made you press play, but I'm glad you did. If you've ever been taken for granted, if someone once held your kindness like it was theirs to spend, then this isn't just my story. It might be yours too. There's something quiet and strong about surviving what was never supposed to touch you. If you've ever walked away from something, not in anger but in silence, and rebuilt something better, even if no one noticed, I'd love to know. Tell me where you're watching from, or just share a line about what you've overcome. It matters. You matter. Before all of this, my life was simple. Not perfect, not full of riches or excitement, but peaceful in a way I had learned to protect. I was a retired elementary school teacher. I taught for 32 years, the kind of job that doesn't make you wealthy but fills your days with small, steady moments of meaning. I still remember the smell of pencil shavings and chalk, the way a quiet student would light up when they finally understood something, the way I used to sit at my desk with a cup of tea and a cardigan draped over the back of my chair. When I retired, I thought the quiet would feel like absence, but it didn't. It felt like rest. After my husband passed, I stayed in the home we built together. It wasn't large, but it had character. Wooden cabinets he stained by hand, a small back garden where I grew rosemary and roses, and a sunroom where the morning light would spill across the floor like honey. The mortgage had been paid off years ago. I didn't owe anyone anything, and I liked it that way. My days were my own. I had my routines. I went to the Tuesday book club at the library, grocery shopped on Wednesdays when it was quiet, and every morning I filled a thermos with coffee and sat by the front window watching the world wake up. It sounds dull to some, but to me it was everything. I had a modest pension, one that came on time each month, nothing extravagant, but enough to cover the bills, groceries, and a little extra to tuck away. I kept some savings, not much, just careful bits gathered over years of watching what I spent. I never needed much. My clothes lasted, my shoes were always sensible, and my joy came from small earned things. Fresh sheets, the smell of garden soil after rain, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan at night. People in my town knew me as the teacher who always brought extra snacks, who walked to church even in the cold, who remembered names and birthdays. There was something steady about me, and I liked being that kind of woman. But what I didn't know, not then, was that peace has a price to people who don't understand it. That someone could look at all the stillness I'd built, all the care I'd tucked into the corners of my life, and see only opportunity. That someone could smile at your quiet world, not because they admire it, but because they think they can take it. I didn't know someone could mistake my peace for a payout, but that's exactly what he did. After the wedding, things didn't shift all at once. It wasn't loud or obvious. That's what made it dangerous. At first, he was just being helpful. Or so I thought. He started bringing in the mail before I got to it, said it was just easier that way, since he got up earlier. I believed him. Then he offered to pay the bills for the month, just to give me a break. I let him. I was tired after all, and it felt nice to be taken care of for once. Then it became routine. He took over the filing cabinet, changed how things were organized, told me not to bother myself with numbers, that I'd earned a rest. I didn't fight it. I told myself it was fine, that sharing a life meant sharing responsibilities, but soon, the mail wasn't just being collected by him, it was disappearing. Things I used to keep track of, my pension slips, my account summaries, notices from the doctor, they stopped arriving. Or maybe they arrived, and I just never saw them again. He said I should stop worrying, that I deserved to enjoy retirement, that I'd spent decades working and raising others, and now it was my time to let go. The way he said it sounded sweet on the surface, but there was something in his tone, a kind of finality, like I was being slowly shelved. My wardrobe started to change next. He would pick out clothes for me and suggest I wear something more comfortable, less fussy. He started calling colors too bright, said he liked when I wore plain beige or navy. At first, I laughed. I thought it was just his taste. But then he started putting away the dresses I liked, hiding them in the back of the closet, replacing my shoes with slip-ons, even though my feet were just fine. I'd find my favorite scarf missing one day, my lipstick drawer rearranged the next. Every piece of me that used to feel like mine was being quietly rewritten. Then came the comments about my calendar. He'd ask why I was still going to the book club, said they were gossiping old women, said I didn't need them anymore. He encouraged me to stay in, rest more, maybe nap in the afternoons. He said it kindly, but there was always a reason I shouldn't go. It became easier to just stop mentioning things. I watched my world shrink, room by room, week by week. My friends would call less. Sometimes I didn't even know they had called. My phone settings would change. Notifications would disappear. He'd say it was a glitch or a battery thing. I wanted to believe him. I really did. One night, I went to get a glass of water and heard him talking on the phone. His voice was low but clear. I stood by the hallway, barefoot, my hand holding the wall. I don't know who he was speaking to. But I heard the words. I heard them. He said, "She's got 10 more years, maybe more if I keep her calm. She doesn't ask questions. I just make sure the meds keep her balanced." My throat tightened. My fingers felt cold. I didn't move. I just stood there, quiet, trying to understand if I'd heard what I thought I had. He said it like it was a business deal, like my life had been reduced to a countdown. I walked back to bed without saying a word. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long this had been happening, wondering when I stopped being his wife and started becoming his project. Everything in that house had been chosen by me once. The curtains, the paint, the photos on the wall. And yet, in that moment, it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a place I was being kept. The quiet, once so comforting, had turned thick and watchful. I realized then, I wasn't being cared for. I was being controlled. And the scariest part? He had done it so slowly, so gently, that I almost missed it. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream or beg for answers that I already knew deep down I wasn't going to get. I didn't argue, because I had nothing left to explain. The things he'd taken from me weren't loud things. They were quiet, like the way morning slips into afternoon. And so when it came time to leave, I matched the silence he'd wrapped around me. I didn't pack loud. I didn't make a list. I didn't slam a drawer. I moved like a breeze through my own house, the one I had built with years of patience, one small piece at a time, long before he ever arrived and tried to rename it. I had been preparing for months, maybe longer than I'd let myself admit. I didn't know exactly when the plan started forming, but somewhere between his soft manipulations and my growing stillness, something inside me started saving itself. I tucked away money from groceries, $5 here, 10 there, slipped between pages of cookbooks he never looked at. I cashed a few old gift cards, moved bits into an account under my maiden name, one he had never bothered to ask about. I kept my identification separate. I rewrote passwords when he wasn't home. I memorized addresses. I rehearsed what I needed, what I didn't, what I could carry, and what I was finally ready to leave behind. The night before I left, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, listening to the clock tick, the refrigerator hum, the dog breathing softly beside me. I looked around at the picture frames, the curtains, the armchair he claimed was his favorite but never actually sat in. I didn't feel afraid. I felt still, like someone who had finally made peace with what was real. I had once believed in us, and then I had survived us. That was enough. When the sky began to turn, just before the light changed from gray to gold, I moved. I folded 2 sweaters, one for warmth and one for comfort. I placed my painting brushes inside a rolled towel, took the only scarf I still loved, the soft green one with the faint lavender print, and tied it around my neck like armor. I grabbed my dog's leash. He looked up at me with no confusion, like he already knew. Maybe he did. Some things don't need words. I wrote one note, small and clear, and left it on the kitchen table. It didn't explain or accuse. It didn't ask for anything. It simply said, "Gone to find my own heir." I didn't sign it. He would know. Or maybe he wouldn't. That part wasn't my burden anymore. I walked out without looking back. There was no phone in my pocket. No forwarding address waiting at the post office. Just a train ticket in my wallet and a name I had scribbled on a sticky note months before. A name from a different time, from someone who once said, "If it ever gets bad, come find me." I didn't know if they still lived there. I didn't even know if they remembered me. But in that moment, I didn't need certainty. I just needed movement. I needed distance. I needed breath. So I disappeared. Not like a ghost, not like someone running, but like dust shaken from a curtain in morning light. Soft, steady, certain. I didn't vanish because I was weak. I vanished because I had finally remembered that I didn't owe anyone the slow death of staying. I vanished because sometimes survival doesn't look like fighting. It looks like walking away, full of everything they thought they had taken from you. 3 states away, the air felt different, softer somehow. The kind of air that doesn't ask anything of you, that lets you breathe without apology. The town I arrived in was small, the kind of place where no one looks twice at a stranger carrying a suitcase and a leash. I didn't need much, just a roof, a lock, and a little silence that wasn't filled with control. I found a room above a small bookstore. Nothing fancy, just a narrow staircase, creaky floors, and a window that looked out over a quiet street with flowering trees and parked bicycles. The owner was kind, didn't ask questions, just handed me the keys and said, "Let me know if you need anything." I nodded and said, "Thank you." Though what I really meant was, I need everything to start again. But I didn't say that. Not yet. The first few days were quiet in a different way. Not the heavy silence I'd left behind, but the gentle kind. I walked with the dog through side streets, sat on benches with coffee in hand, and let my mind slowly adjust to the idea that no one was watching me. I was nobody there, and that made me feel like someone again. I found a bulletin board inside the bookstore with a flyer for a painting group. Thursday mornings. No fee. Just bring your own supplies and an open heart. I stared at it for a while before taking one of the pull tabs. It had been years since I painted, since I held a brush just for me. That Thursday, I showed up with my old brushes wrapped in the same towel I'd packed weeks earlier. My hands shook a little when I dipped the first one in water, but once the color touched the paper, something settled. We weren't there to impress. We were just there to create, to speak through color, to let our hands do what our mouths sometimes couldn't. No one asked about my past, no one pried. We talked about texture, light, how certain blues made us feel something we couldn't name. And that was enough. On my 3rd week there, I met Clara. She had short silver hair, glasses that always slid down her nose, and a voice that could cut through any lie without raising an octave. She introduced herself like she already knew me, like we were simply continuing a conversation that had paused years ago. We got coffee after class, sat outside a small cafe where the chairs wobbled, and the sugar was always in little mismatched jars. She asked if I was local. I said I was just passing through. She didn't push. She just nodded and said, "Sometimes passing through takes longer than expected." It came out slowly in pieces like puzzle edges without a box to show the picture. I told her about the house, the man, the control that crept in quietly. I told her about the night I left, about the shoebox, about the scarf. She listened like she'd heard a version of it before. And when I was done, she pulled out a small notepad and said, "Let's make sure you're covered." I found out she used to be a legal assistant, sharp, organized, no nonsense. She helped me sort my papers, move my accounts, secure my identity again. We updated my will, put everything under my name, and made sure nothing could trace me back without my permission. I didn't even know I needed most of it, but she did. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone was standing beside me, not above me. The local vet took a liking to my dog, said he had a noble face, and gave him a free checkup after noticing a limp in his back leg. I didn't have to ask. People just showed up with kindness, the kind that didn't come with strings. It reminded me that not every hand that reaches for you is trying to take something. Some just want to hold yours until it stops shaking. Clara and I started meeting every week after painting class. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to walk through antique shops and laugh at things we once owned 30 years ago. She had a way of making me laugh with my whole body, the kind of laugh that makes your eyes water and your ribs ache. I hadn't done that in years. We sat by the window of the cafe one afternoon, watching the rain slide down the glass, and I told her I hadn't felt this much like myself in a long time. She smiled and said, "That's because you're finally standing in your own light again." And she was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was never about punishing him or proving a point. It was about peeling myself out from under the life he tried to write over mine. It was about remembering that I existed outside of his shadow, that I had a name before he arrived and would still have one long after he was gone. I didn't need to win anything. I just needed to reclaim the pieces of me he had quietly chipped away at. One coffee, one brushstroke, one signature at a time. And that's exactly what I was doing. What he didn't know is that while he was busy building a trap around me, I was quietly building a way out. Every time he tightened his grip, I tucked something away. A document, a password, a name. I didn't move in panic. I moved in planning. I knew if I left without protecting myself first, he'd come for what wasn't his. So before I ever stepped out that door, I made sure the house was mine again. Quietly visited the registry office on a day he thought I was at the clinic. Transferred the deed back to my name alone. Removed his signature where the law allowed and reinforced mine where it mattered. I rewrote the narrative he had started to control. And I did it with steady hands. The bank accounts, separated. The pension, locked under two-step verification with a new number, a new address, and a password no one could guess. Not even someone who studied me like a textbook. I moved my savings into a trust account with my maiden name. Even my ID was updated at the quiet little municipal office 2 towns over where no one knew him, and no one asked too many questions. I carried every document I needed in a manila folder, wrapped inside a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, because he never cared to check the spines of my books. So when he realized I was gone, really gone, he moved fast. He called my pension office first, asked about his wife's monthly deposits, wanted to check if I'd missed a form or failed to submit a change of address. He spoke calmly, I imagine, like he always did when trying to get something without showing his teeth. But they blocked him. Completely. No access. No information. He tried to charm them, maybe even pressure them, but policies are stronger than persuasion when the right protections are in place. What I had built in silence was now holding firm. He tried to sell the house next, put out feelers, maybe called an agent or two. But when he pulled the paperwork, he hit a wall. The name on the title was mine. Only mine. The deed had been amended, the paperwork updated, and every clause he once snuck in had been legally removed. He couldn't even prove ownership, let alone list the property. He must have stood there in the living room, staring at the walls, wondering when it all slipped from his fingers. I imagine he tried to tell himself it was a mistake. Maybe thought there was a hidden copy of something that would save him. But there wasn't. He'd built his plan on the assumption that I'd stay still. And I didn't. Then he went to the police, reported me missing, tried to wrap his selfishness in concern. I can almost hear his voice as he described me to the officer on duty. Gentle, quiet, maybe confused, maybe on medication. He must have leaned into the idea that I'd wandered off, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I wasn't capable of leaving with intention. But the officer pulled up my file, saw the travel ticket, the withdrawal logs, the signature on the updated legal forms. I wasn't missing. I had moved, and I hadn't left breadcrumbs for him to follow because he was never supposed to find me. The police told him plainly, "She's not missing. She left you." And that sentence must have hit harder than any door I could have slammed on the way out. He never understood the difference between being quiet and being passive. Thought that because I folded his socks and brewed his tea, I was weak. Thought because I listened more than I spoke, I lacked power. But he forgot that quiet women carry long memories. He forgot that just because someone doesn't raise their voice doesn't mean they're not making plans. He married me for money, for comfort, for access. But what he underestimated was the mind that earned that money, the patience that built that comfort, and the clarity that had always lived under the surface, waiting for a reason to rise. I didn't disappear in fear. I disappeared in strategy. I didn't vanish to hide. I vanished to protect what was mine, and to reclaim what he'd been slowly taking without permission. He thought I was just a widow who missed being noticed. a woman eager for companionship, too starved for touch to think clearly. What he didn't see, what he never bothered to look for, was the woman beneath the softness. The one who raised a family, buried a husband, balanced a household, taught generations of children, managed her own affairs without fanfare. He didn't see her, because he never wanted to. But that's the version of me who left. That's the version who made sure he had nothing left to steal. And while he was pacing that house, calling numbers that no longer picked up, trying to explain to people why his wife had vanished without leaving crumbs, I was sipping tea with Clara, laughing at how I used to think silence was peace, when really it had become a cage. I had stepped out of it, and in doing so, I had made sure the door locked behind me, not for me, but for him. There would be no return, no loophole, no second chance. I had erased his name from every space he thought he owned, and I did it the same way he tried to erase me, quietly, patiently, and completely. 3 months passed like water through open fingers, and I let them. I didn't mark the days, I didn't count the weeks. I let time carry me forward, because looking back served no purpose anymore. There were mornings I'd forget what day it was and only realize by the sound of the bakery bell downstairs, or the way the bookstore owner turned the front sign exactly at 9:15. I found rhythm in small things again. In walks with my dog through winding paths that smelled of salt and rosemary. In the way the light changed inside the cafe at dusk, brushing our tables with a soft gold that made everyone look kinder. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was healing. Quietly, deeply, without needing applause or permission. I painted with no plan, sat on park benches without thinking, and spoke to strangers who didn't know my story and didn't need to. But healing, as gentle as it feels, has sharp edges too. There came a moment, one ordinary afternoon with the breeze fluttering the curtains and Clara humming in the next room, when I realized I didn't want to stay hidden forever. Not to return, not to explain, but to say one thing, just one. Not for closure, not for kindness, but for truth. He had filled so much space in my life with control, with silence, with calculated kindness that left no room for my own voice. I wanted to send something back, not to reopen the door, but to close it with clarity. I went to a small paper shop that smelled like cedar and ink. They had rows of postcards, some with landscapes, others with silly phrases, and a few with nothing at all, just soft colors and room for a message. I picked the plainest one I could find. Cream, smooth, unlined. I bought a new pen, the kind that glides, because I wanted the words to flow clean, steady, final. I sat at the back table of the cafe, ordered my usual, and waited until the cup was warm in my hands before writing the sentence I had carried quietly since the moment I walked away. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I didn't include a return address. He didn't deserve to know where my new joy lived. On that card, in those few words, I placed all the weight he once tried to put on my shoulders. And this time, I handed it back. I wrote, "I hope the silence taught you something." That was it. I pressed the pen down a little harder at the end, folded it in my hands for a moment, and then slid it into the mailbox on the corner. I walked away without turning back. I didn't wonder how he'd receive it. I didn't imagine his face or rehearse what he might say. I just let it go. Weeks later, I received a message through a mutual friend of a neighbor, one who didn't know much but knew enough to pass something along without giving anything away. She said he'd received the postcard, that he sat in the driveway for hours, not moving, not speaking, just holding the card in his hands like it was a relic. She said he didn't shout, he didn't call anyone. He just sat still as stone until the sun went down and the street lights buzzed to life one by one. Then he left. He left the house, the one he thought he could own through marriage. Left the front door locked, but the key still hanging on the hook, as if he knew he had no claim to it anymore. He didn't pack loudly either, I heard. No anger, no mess. Just a man finally realizing that what he thought he controlled had never belonged to him to begin with. That everything he had built his plan on had been dismantled piece by piece while he wasn't looking. That the woman he once silenced now spoke in ways that couldn't be argued with. Not in shouting, not in threats, but in quiet certainty. And I didn't rejoice when I heard that. I didn't smile or gloat or call Clara to celebrate. I just sat on my little balcony with a fresh cup of tea, listening to the wind brush through the trees, and I breathed. Because that was enough. That one sentence, sent across miles, sealed what needed sealing. There would be no follow-up, no answer, no open door, only space. Space that I had carved with every quiet decision, every plan made while he underestimated me. He never thought I'd leave. He never imagined I'd thrive. He certainly never expected to be the one left in silence. But that's exactly where I left him. And for once, he had to sit with it, just like I once did. Only now, it was his turn to wonder when the stillness would break. Except this time, it never would. When I finally returned, I didn't announce it. There was no moment of arrival, no dramatic pause in the air. I simply opened the door, stepped inside, and let the quiet wrap around me. Not the old silence I had escaped, but a new kind, one I had earned. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It didn't feel like his shadow still lingered in the corners or like his voice still echoed down the hallway. It felt still, clean, mine. I walked from room to room, not to search, but to remember what I'd once loved about this space before he tried to take it from me. The garden was overgrown, but the rosemary had survived. My favorite teacup was still tucked in the back of the cabinet. I changed the curtains, aired out the closets, and washed the sheets even though no one had touched them in months. I lit a candle, opened the windows, and let the wind carry out the rest. No trace of him remained. Not on the furniture, not in the air, not in me. I didn't return because I missed the place. I returned because I had reclaimed it. Every corner now belonged to a woman who had left quietly, returned freely, and no longer answered to anyone but herself. If someone ever turned your heart into an investment, like something they expected to profit from, I see you. If they smiled while quietly arranging your silence, if they called it love while planning a life that erased you from your own story, you're not alone. Some of us give everything in the name of trust, only to learn too late that we were being studied, not cherished. And if that's ever happened to you, if you had to leave quietly just to hear your own thoughts again, I hope you'll tell me. Or just write, I disappeared for me. That's enough. Because sometimes we don't leave for escape, we leave for air. And if you're watching this alone, unsure if anyone understands what it feels like to rebuild in secret, I do. I understand. You're not forgotten here. You're not invisible. You belong. And if this space gives you even a little peace, then stay a while. Subscribe if you want to. There's room here.